Did you know there's an African-American population native to the Dominican Republic? And they've been here for nearly 200 years. And no, they're not passport bros. This is the story of the Samaná Americans, freed African-Americans who settled here centuries ago and whose descendants still live here. And they've kept a blend of culture and language that makes the area very unique.
My mother is from Samana. The Hamilton, Vanderhorst, Copeland families are part of my lineage.
That was Ryan Mann-Hamilton, an anthropologist and descendant of the very families who came here 200 years ago. Now, back in 1824, while the U.S. was still holding on tight to slavery, the entire island of Hispaniola was free and under Haitian rule, led by the president, Jean-Pierre Boyer. In an effort to create a Black republic, he invited free Black families in the U.S. to trade oppression for true freedom, tropical breeze, and a beautiful coastline. About 7,000 Black Americans were like, equality with a side of sancocho? Say less. Not all of them stayed, but a core group of families did for a chance to experience that greater freedom.
We're talking 1824, so this is before the Emancipation Proclamation and everything else. So it was a very small free community in the northern states, but they were still limited in too many ways, right? They had freedom, but they couldn't have ownership of land, ownership of property. They were not allowed to, for example, have their own church, right? The AME church comes out of that struggle when basically they're not allowed to even preach themselves. It's freedom on paper, but not in action, not in politics, not in any other way or form.
I imagine Samaná sounded really good to any African American living in the United States prior to 1865. But when they got here, a lot of them were assigned to field work. And they were like, I'm used to city living. I ain't built for this no more. So a lot of them left. But those who stayed brought the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the English language, and community structures. They really wanted to build something for themselves from the ground up.
They are mostly all AME members in some way or form. And so I think that becomes sort of the main site of organizing at the end of the day, right? And even if you go just to La Churcha, which is now evangelical, the hymns themselves, right? The hymnals that they brought with them from the United States are still sung in those churches as well.
The narrative for a long time was that Samaná was relatively isolated. And it's been said that is what helped preserve a lot of their distinctive culture and community. But they were never completely cut off from the world, and there was also an aspect of resistance that led to the preservation of their culture.
It's quite the opposite, right? They are always connected to the different maritime routes and everything else. What remains is really not just because, it's because of resistance. The Spanish were trying to re-annex Samaná and re-annex Dominican Republic to Spain itself. One of the first things they did was to take over the church. And there was huge protests. But if we even think about the structures of Samaná, the oldest building in Samaná is a church, particularly, again, because it's a site of gathering resistance, but also a site of history.
The Samaná Americans rarely intermarried with the local Spanish-speaking population, so the area became a hub for other English-speaking Afro-descendants. And today, there are many people in the Dominican Republic who still speak Samaná English. It's similar to a Caribbean English Creole. The golden age for Samaná was 1870 to 1900 when the African-American population was flourishing. They held political power and became a central place for commerce. They were doing so well, other groups started migrating over. And of course, whenever Black people are doing well, here comes someone ready to ruin it all.
There's a huge cacao industry in Samaná at that point in time. Samaná, again, because of its particular location, there's a lot of sailing that goes on there. You have cars, there's electricity, there's theaters. There was even a movie theater that you don't even have today in Samaná, right? And a very cosmopolitan culture in that regard, right? But again, you had all these different things there. And I always imagined that space. I'm like, wow, that would have been fascinating to be there then, right?
By 1974, the Dominican government, backed by Spain, began transforming Samaná into a tourism hub. But that development came at a cost. Many descendants of the original Black American settlers were displaced with little compensation.
I mean, we're talking about a full-scale destruction of the community and local institutions. So the basic autonomy that they had built up over time was snatched. And in doing so, education as well, right? Their educational institutions were closed for almost 2 years while they sort of were moved from place to place and the government figured out what to do. But that also brought on a whole generation of Samaneses that left, right? For one, left the area, but also who grew up not knowing what Samaná looked like prior to and traditions that were there before.
Today, a lot of the history of the Samaná Americans has been lost to time and deliberate efforts at erasure, and their descendants are discriminated against. Tell me whether or not you feel the government recognizes your community's role in Dominican history.
No. That's succinct. No.
Despite that, locals are doing their part to gain support for the preservation of their history.
But for example, we just had the 200-year anniversary last year. As part of that anniversary, it was the community that put together the events.
And as travelers, we can do our part by sharing their story, connecting with the community, and giving back.
When you come visit Samaná, connect with some of the local folks. Leave the hotels. There are lots of local folks on the ground who know the most interesting spaces, places, and people in the peninsula, and they will love to take you there and show you those different spaces. Just think about where your money is going.
As I travel around the world, I am constantly finding interesting stories like this. So follow along if you want to explore the world with me, and let me know what I should check out next.